Being a single father has always been hard for me, but it has even been harder for my son. My wife has passed away when my son was 3. She was admitted into the hospital for pains in her midsection. 3 days later, she passed away in her sleep. My son never received the attention he needed. Since he was 3, I had to send him to my parents' house while I worked and picked him up around 7. We would eat dinner and watch a couple of shows, but I would sometimes catch him looking at the empty seat next to him. Whenever he did that, I would feel my eyes start to tear up. It really felt like he knew that that was where his mother used to sit. Until he turned 4, he would go into my room and open up a heart-shaped jelly and place it on top of his sippy cup and place it on the desk my wife bought me for our 5th anniversary. That was the last anniversary we spent together. When he stopped doing that nightly ritual, it started to grow more and more distant with me. It broke my heart, but I continued to work and spend less and less time with him. By the time he was 5, he started to scream and shout whenever I picked him up. My breaking point came when my father walked out of the house to wave goodbye to my son, and he yelled, "Take me back to Daddy! I want Daddy! Let me go! Let me go!" With tears welling up in my eyes, I got him into the car seat and took him home. I had money I saved up to start my own restaurant, but I didn't want to lose my son. He was the remaining part of my life I had left, and he meant more to me than my life did. The first week of keeping him home with me was rough. They were filled with my son constantly asking me when I would take him to Mommy and Daddy. But I told him that we were going to stay at home for a little while. He would scream and cry for almost the remainder of the day until I fed him his dinner and put him to bed. 3 days ago, we went to Walmart together to pick up some groceries. While we were there, I went into the electronics section to get a phone charger. My son was standing close to me the whole time. But when I finally picked out a charger, I looked around and saw that he vanished. I started to run across the electronics section until I saw him standing in front of a tablet. When I walked up to him, I saw that all of his attention was on the tablet. I looked at the price tag and, without a second thought, flagged the worker and told him I wanted to buy one. My son looked at me and, for the first time, he was smiling at me. While I was purchasing the tablet, the man that was ringing me up said, "Man, this is the best tablet for the money. I bought it for my son and he has been learning so much from it. Now I swear he's teaching me stuff I never knew." I chuckled and handed him my card. The entire car ride back, my son begged me to take the tablet out of the box, but I told him to wait till the morning. He huffed and sighed, but I could tell he was excited for the morning. After my son went to bed, I spent about an hour setting up the tablet. It's one of those kid-safe tablets that allow parents to restrict the apps, mount the usage time in websites. Once I was satisfied with the restrictions, I plugged the phone and tablet up and went to bed. I woke up the next morning to my son bouncing on my chest. Teasingly, I asked him, "What do you want?" He started to scream out the tablet, and while I laughed, I unplugged the tablet and handed it to him. With a squeal of delight, he ran out of my room. Distant sound of clicking from the tablet made me smile as I fell asleep again. At 9:45, I woke back up again and walked out into the living room to see my son was working on a little puzzle on the tablet. The day went by smooth. When the 4-hour I mark hit, my son's tablet locked up, and he brought it to me. I told him that he would have to play with something else for 5 hours before he could play with the tablet again. I readied myself for a fit, and he just smiled and said, "Okay," before running into his room. 3 hours later, I heard the sound of sirens coming from a distance, stopping close to my house. I peeked out the house and saw 2 cops running into my neighbor's house. I opened the door and stepped out and saw my neighbor open the door and walk outside with his arms up. My son walked out the door and stood beside me. Before I could get him back inside, he said he killed his wife. Did it after her skull with a hammer while she slept. I turned around to stare at him before asking, "You don't say stuff like that, Eric. Who taught you that?" With a smile, he looked up at me and asked, "Taught me what?" While I tried to think of what to say, he ran into the house and into his room. The entire time we ate dinner, I tried talking to him, but he would just look up at me and say, "Tablet," before resuming his meal. When he ate all that he wanted, he got off of his chair and went to his room. When I finished my dinner, I went up to his room and saw that he was already asleep. With a sigh, I walked in and took his socks off before tucking him and giving him a kiss on his cheek. I plugged up his tablet and my phone and attempted to sleep, but I couldn't keep my eyes closed. The concern for my son overwhelmed me. And after several hours of tossing and turning, I got out of the bed and went through the entire tablet. 2 hours later, I finally plugged the tablet back, the charger, and went back to bed. Yesterday morning, I woke up to the sound of voices coming from the living room. When I walked out the living room, my son pointed at the TV and said, "Told you." Our local news channel was talking about what my neighbor did. He was convicted of murdering his wife and storing her body in his wine cellar. I felt the blood rush from my face while I turned the TV off. My son got off the couch and ran into my room. He came back out with his tablet and started messing around with a couple of games on it. I looked over his shoulder the entire time he was on the tablet. The only odd thing he did was clicking on the browser and stayed on the front page while staring at the screen with more fascination than the entire time he was on his tablet. He kept staring at it until the screen blacked out and went to the lock screen. Without a word, he handed the tablet back to me. But before he ran off, he looked at me and said, "Grandma and Grandpa killed my mom. They poisoned her, but you were too stupid to know." I picked the tablet up and begged for it to tell me. When I unlocked the tablet, it just went to a black screen before white letters appeared on the screen. It said, "Stupid man." My son and I went back to Walmart to return the tablet. But when they tried to process the refund, they told me that the tablet was never on their system. I took the receipt out of my pocket and gave it to them. But the girl looked at me and said, You need to leave. When I tried to reason with her, she just got madder and said, I'm tired of people thinking they can say whatever they want to me just because I work here. My son loves me. He will always love me. Go away, you piece of crap. She threw my receipt back at me. When I picked it up, I noticed that the receipt now only said one thing. Just accept it. You're a sad excuse of a parent. Your son will never love you. After I put my son to bed, I tried sleeping, but every time I started to fall asleep, I would hear my wife's voice say, You could have saved me, but you were just too foolish. Every time I looked up, I would see my son standing at the doorway. I woke up this morning after sleeping for just 2 hours. I don't know who to turn to. This is my last hope. Please, guys, help me. I'm scared. And for the first time in my life, I truly don't know what to do.